Son threw his mother out for warning him about his fiancée. 3 years later, he crawled back in tears. Hello everyone, welcome to our story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Get out of my house. Daniel's voice boomed through the beautiful living room like thunder during a storm. Mama Margaret stood frozen like a statue, her old cloth bag still in her hands. She had been putting her few things together, thinking maybe she would go stay with her neighbor Mrs. Olivia for a few days. She wanted to give Daniel and Rebecca some space to plan their wedding. She never thought her own son would throw her out like she was a stranger. Daniel, please, she whispered, her voice shaking like leaves in the wind. I'm your mother. I just want what's best for you. Best for me? Daniel's face turned red with anger. You've been nothing but trouble since Rebecca came into my life. You complain about everything she does. You make her feel unwelcome in our home. Rebecca stood behind Daniel with a satisfied smile on her pretty face. She was wearing a new dress that cost more money than most people made in a month. She crossed her arms and watched as the son she had slowly turned against his mother delivered the final blow. Maybe it's time for you to find your own place, Mrs. Margaret, Rebecca said sweetly, but her eyes were as cold as ice. Daniel and I are building a new life together. We don't need old-fashioned ideas holding us back. Margaret's heart felt like it was breaking into a million pieces. This was the same Daniel she had carried on her back when he was sick as a baby. This was the boy she had worked 3 jobs for, cleaning offices at night and selling vegetables during the day just so he could go to school. My son, Margaret said softly, do you remember when you were 7 years old and you got very sick? The doctor said you might not make it. I stayed by your bed for 2 weeks without sleeping. I prayed and cried and promised God I would do anything to keep you alive. Daniel's anger flickered for a moment, like a candle in the wind. I sold my only gold jewelry to pay for your medicine, Margaret continued, tears now falling down her cheeks. When you were hungry, I went without food. When you needed school fees, I borrowed money and worked extra hours to pay it back. That was then. Daniel shouted, but his voice wasn't as strong as before. This is now. I'm a grown man. I can take care of myself. Rebecca moved closer to Daniel and put her hand on his arm. Baby, she's trying to make you feel guilty. Don't let her manipulate you. The word, manipulate, was too big for some people to understand, but Margaret knew what it meant. She looked at Rebecca with sad eyes. I am not trying to manipulate anyone, Margaret said. I am trying to save my son from making a mistake that will hurt him. What mistake? Rebecca asked, pretending to be innocent. Loving someone beautiful and educated like me? Margaret took a deep breath. Yesterday when Daniel went to the bank, I heard you on the phone. You were talking to someone, laughing about how easy it was to make my son buy you expensive things. You called him foolish. Rebecca's face changed for just a second, showing her real feelings. But then she quickly put on a hurt expression. Mrs. Margaret, how could you say such a terrible thing about me? Rebecca said, and fake tears appeared in her eyes. Daniel, do you hear how your mother talks about the woman you love? Daniel looked confused. He looked at his mother, then at Rebecca, then back at his mother. I heard what I heard, Margaret said firmly. And I saw you going through Daniel's papers when he was sleeping. You were looking at his bank statements and property documents. That's a lie. Rebecca cried out. Daniel, I can't live like this anymore. Every day your mother accuses me of terrible things. I feel like a prisoner in this house. Daniel's anger came back stronger than before. He had worked so hard to make Rebecca happy. She was the most beautiful woman who had ever loved him, and his mother was trying to ruin it. Enough. Daniel yelled. Mama, I'm done with this. Rebecca has never done anything wrong to you, but you keep attacking her. Daniel, please just think, Margaret started. No. I'm tired of thinking. I'm tired of your complaints. Daniel's voice was so loud that the neighbors could probably hear. If you can't be nice to the woman I'm going to marry, then you can't live in my house. Margaret felt like the ground was disappearing under her feet. You're throwing me out? Yes. Daniel said, and the word came out like a bullet. I'm choosing Rebecca over you. She loves me, supports me, and makes me happy. All you do is cause problems. Rebecca hid her smile behind her hand, but Margaret saw it. Where will I go? Margaret asked, her voice barely a whisper. I don't care. Daniel shouted, and as soon as he said it, something inside him felt wrong. But he was too angry and proud to take it back. Figure it out. You're always telling me how strong and smart you are. Margaret stood there for a moment, looking at the son she had given her whole life to. She remembered teaching him to walk, helping him with his homework, cheering when he got his first job. Now that same little boy was throwing her out like garbage. Very well, Margaret said, standing up straight. Her voice was quiet but strong. I will go. She picked up her old cloth bag and walked toward the door. Daniel watched her, and something inside him wanted to say, "Wait, I'm sorry." But Rebecca squeezed his hand and he stayed quiet. At the door, Margaret turned around one last time. I will always love you, Daniel, she said. When you realize the truth about the people around you, I will be waiting. A mother's love never ends, even when her child breaks her heart. Then she opened the door and walked out into the cold, rainy night. Rebecca immediately hugged Daniel tight. Oh baby, I know that was hard for you. But you did the right thing. Now we can be happy together without anyone interfering with our love. Daniel nodded, but he felt empty inside. He looked at the door where his mother had just left and wondered why winning felt so much like losing. Outside in the rain, Margaret walked slowly down the dark street. She had nowhere to go and very little money. But she held her head high because she knew she had tried to protect her son, even though it cost her everything. She didn't know that in exactly 3 years, Daniel would be walking down this same street, looking for her with tears in his eyes and regret in his heart. As Margaret stepped outside, Rebecca quickly locked the door behind her. Click. The sound was like a nail being hammered into a coffin. Margaret stood on the street outside the house where she had been so happy just that morning. The security lights were bright, but everything felt dark. Cars drove by quickly, their lights flashing past her like shooting stars. She had nowhere to go. Most of her old friends lived far away in other parts of the city. She had spent all her time working and taking care of Daniel, so she didn't have many people to call. But even as her heart was breaking into tiny pieces, Margaret whispered a prayer. Father God, please watch over my son. Open his eyes before it's too late. Help him see that this woman will hurt him. She picked up her small cloth bag and started walking down the long street, not knowing where she would sleep that night. The rain was getting heavier. Margaret's old shoes were not good for walking long distances, and soon her feet began to hurt. But she kept walking because she had no choice. After walking for what felt like hours, she remembered Mrs. Olivia. Mrs. Olivia was her friend from church, a kind woman who sold bread at the local market. Maybe she would let Margaret stay for just one night. Margaret found Mrs. Olivia's small house at the end of a narrow street. It was very different from Daniel's big house, small, simple, with old paint on the walls. But when Margaret knocked on the door with shaking hands, it felt like knocking on the door of heaven. Who is there? Came a voice from inside. It's Margaret, she called out softly, her voice weak from crying. The door opened quickly and Mrs. Olivia's round, kind face appeared. When she saw Margaret standing in the rain, wet and shaking, her eyes grew wide with worry. Sister Margaret, what happened to you? Mrs. Olivia pulled Margaret inside immediately. Inside the warm little house, Margaret's strength finally gave out. She sat down on Mrs. Olivia's old couch and began to cry like a child. My son threw me out, Margaret whispered between sobs. Daniel threw me out of his house because of that girl. Mrs. Olivia's mouth fell open in shock. Daniel? You're Daniel? The boy you raised by yourself? Margaret could only nod. The words were too painful to say again. Mrs. Olivia quickly brought a warm towel and wrapped it around Margaret's shoulders. Tell me everything that happened. So Margaret told her friend the whole story, about the warnings, about Rebecca's coldness, about Daniel's angry words, about the door locking behind her. Mrs. Olivia listened with growing anger. That boy has lost his mind. How can he treat his own mother like this? He thinks he loves her, Margaret said sadly. He can't see what she really is. Love. Mrs. Olivia made a sound of disgust. Real love doesn't make you cruel to your family. That girl has poisoned his mind. While the two women talked, something very different was happening back at Daniel's house. Rebecca was already on her phone, walking around the living room like she owned everything in it. Yes, the plan is working perfectly, she said quietly into the phone. The old woman is finally gone. Now I can start phase 2. The person on the other end of the phone was Marcus, Rebecca's real boyfriend. He was a smooth-talking man who helped Rebecca trick rich men into giving her their money. How much do you think you can get from him? Marcus asked. Rebecca looked around the expensive room and smiled like a cat that had caught a mouse. This fool has 3 businesses, 2 houses, and a lot of money in the bank. If I play this right, I can get everything. And the wedding? Oh, there will be a wedding, Rebecca laughed softly. The most expensive wedding the city has ever seen. He's already agreed to spend $20,000 on it. After that, I'll get him to put everything in my name, for safety. Then we disappear with everything he has. You're brilliant, baby, Marcus said. Just don't let him get suspicious. Please, Rebecca said, looking at herself in the mirror. This man is so blinded by love that he can't see past my pretty face. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll be on a plane to America with his money. When Daniel came out of the bathroom, Rebecca quickly ended her call. Who were you talking to? Daniel asked. Just my friend from university, Rebecca lied smoothly. She was congratulating us on finally having our own space. Daniel smiled, but something felt empty inside him. Without his mother's presence, the big house felt cold and lonely. Are you hungry? Daniel asked. Should I cook something for us? Rebecca wrinkled her nose. Cook? Baby, why would you cook when we can order expensive food from that new restaurant downtown? You work so hard, you deserve to be treated like a king. This made Daniel feel good. His mother always cooked simple food at home: rice, stew, vegetables from the market. Rebecca was teaching him to enjoy the finer things in life. You're right, Daniel said. Let's order the most expensive meal they have. As Daniel called the restaurant, Rebecca smiled to herself. Every expensive meal, every costly gift, every luxury was taking Daniel's money away little by little. Soon there would be nothing left and she would be long gone. That night, Daniel ate expensive foreign food that cost more than his mother spent on groceries for a whole week. But somehow, it didn't taste as good as his mother's simple cooking. Meanwhile, Margaret shared a simple dinner of bread and tea with Mrs. Olivia. It was the cheapest meal possible, but it was given with love and kindness. You can stay here as long as you need, Mrs. Olivia told Margaret. Tomorrow we'll think about what to do next. I need to find work, Margaret said. I can't depend on your kindness forever. There's always work for someone willing to do it, Mrs. Olivia said. But tonight just rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. As Margaret tried to sleep on the small couch, she could hear the rain still falling outside. She prayed quietly for her son, asking God to protect him from the woman who was going to hurt him. She didn't know that at that very moment, Rebecca was looking through Daniel's important papers, studying his bank accounts and property documents while he slept peacefully, trusting the woman who was planning to destroy his life. The next morning, Margaret woke up on Mrs. Olivia's small couch feeling like her whole world had changed overnight. The sun was shining through the tiny window, but her heart still felt dark. Mrs. Olivia was already awake, making tea in her little kitchen. Good morning, sister, Mrs. Olivia said gently. How did you sleep? Not very well, Margaret admitted. I kept thinking about Daniel. Of course you did. You're his mother. Mrs. Olivia brought Margaret a cup of hot tea. But today is a new day. We need to think about your future. Margaret sat up slowly. Her back hurt from sleeping on the couch, but she didn't complain. She was grateful to have a roof over her head. I need to find work, Margaret said. I can't stay here forever taking your kindness. Sister, please. You're not taking anything. But you're right about work. A woman needs to be independent. Mrs. Olivia sat down next to her. What kind of work do you want to do? Margaret thought for a moment. I know how to cook very well. I know how to sew. I can clean houses. I'm not too proud for any honest work. Good, Mrs. Olivia nodded. There's a woman I know, Mrs. Elizabeth, who owns a small restaurant near the market. She's been looking for someone to help her cook. The pay isn't much, but it's honest money. Can you take me to her today? Margaret asked, feeling hopeful for the first time since leaving Daniel's house. Of course. After we finish our tea, we'll go see her. Meanwhile, across the city in Daniel's big house, Daniel was having a very different kind of morning. He woke up to find Rebecca already dressed in an expensive outfit, putting on jewelry that sparkled like stars. Good morning, my king, Rebecca said, kissing his cheek. I have a busy day planned for us. What kind of busy day? Daniel asked, still feeling sleepy. Wedding planning, of course. Rebecca's eyes lit up with excitement. We need to go look at that hotel I told you about. The one that costs $20,000. Daniel's stomach felt tight. $20,000 was a lot of money, even for him. Rebecca, maybe we should look at some other places too. Just to compare prices. Rebecca's smile disappeared like a light being turned off. Daniel, are you trying to embarrass me? Do you want all of the city to laugh at us for having a cheap wedding? No, Daniel said quickly. I just thought. You just thought what? That I'm not worth the best. Rebecca's voice was getting louder. Maybe your mother was right. Maybe you don't really love me. Daniel felt panic in his chest. Don't say that. You know I love you more than anything. Then prove it, Rebecca said, crossing her arms. Show me that you love me enough to give me the wedding of my dreams. Daniel looked at Rebecca's beautiful face and felt his heart melting. Okay. We'll book the expensive hotel. Rebecca's smile came back immediately. Oh Daniel. You're the most wonderful man in the world. She hugged him tight. And there's one more tiny thing. What is it? Daniel asked, though he was starting to feel worried. Well, I was talking to my friend who works at the bank. She said that smart couples put their properties in both names. You know, for protection. Daniel frowned. Protection from what? Oh, you know, taxes, business problems, things like that, Rebecca said, waving her hand like it wasn't important. Rich people do it all the time. It shows that you trust me completely. Something inside Daniel felt uncomfortable, but Rebecca was already kissing his neck and whispering sweet words in his ear. I'll think about it, Daniel said. Don't think too long, baby, Rebecca said. The sooner we do it, the sooner we can start our perfect life together. Back at the market, Margaret was meeting Mrs. Elizabeth for the first time. Mrs. Elizabeth was a round, friendly woman with a big smile and hands that were always moving. So you're Margaret, Mrs. Elizabeth said, looking Margaret up and down. Olivia tells me you can cook. Yes, ma'am, Margaret said respectfully. I've been cooking all my life. Can you cook jollof rice? Yes, ma'am. Pepper soup? Yes, ma'am. Fried plantain, pounded yam, egusi stew? All of them, ma'am. Mrs. Elizabeth nodded, impressed. And you're willing to work hard? Start early, finish late, deal with difficult customers. Margaret thought about everything she had been through in her life. Working hard had never scared her. I'm willing to do whatever honest work you give me, Margaret said firmly. Good. Mrs. Elizabeth clapped her hands. You start tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. The pay is small, but if you work hard, I'll increase it after 1 month. Margaret felt tears of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, ma'am. You won't regret giving me this chance. That evening, as Margaret helped Mrs. Olivia prepare dinner, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. See, Mrs. Olivia said, stirring the pot of rice. God always makes a way. Even when things look impossible. I just pray that God will also make a way for Daniel, Margaret said quietly. I pray that he'll realize his mistake before it's too late. Mrs. Olivia looked at her friend with sad eyes. Sister, sometimes people have to learn their lessons the hard way. All we can do is pray and wait. At Daniel's house that same evening, Rebecca was on the phone again with Marcus. The wedding is set, she whispered while Daniel was in the shower. $20,000. And I'm working on getting him to sign over his properties. How much longer do you think this will take? Marcus asked. Not long, Rebecca said, looking at the expensive watch Daniel had bought her. Maybe 6 months. By then I'll have everything. His businesses, his houses, his bank accounts, everything. And then? Rebecca's laugh was cold and cruel. And then we disappear and Daniel can learn what it feels like to have nothing. Just like his pathetic mother. She hung up just as Daniel came out of the shower, humming happily, completely unaware that the woman he loved was planning to destroy his entire life. Who were you talking to? Daniel asked. Nobody important, baby, Rebecca lied smoothly. I was just ordering some new dresses for our engagement party. Engagement party? Daniel looked confused. We're already engaged. I know, silly. But we need to throw a big party to announce it officially. All the important people in the city should know that Daniel and Rebecca are getting married. Daniel's head was spinning. First a $20,000 wedding, now an expensive engagement party. But Rebecca looked so beautiful and happy that he couldn't say no. How much will this party cost? He asked weakly. Don't worry about money, my love, Rebecca said, wrapping her arms around him. You're a successful businessman. You can afford to celebrate your love properly. As Daniel nodded agreement, he didn't notice the satisfied smile that crossed Rebecca's face. Her plan was working perfectly. But across the city, Margaret was kneeling by Mrs. Olivia's couch, praying with all her heart for her son's protection. Father God, she whispered, please don't let this woman destroy my child. Open his eyes before she takes everything from him. Margaret didn't know it yet, but her prayers were about to be tested in ways she never imagined. 3 weeks passed and Margaret had settled into her new life. Every morning at 5 o'clock, she would walk to Mrs. Elizabeth's restaurant and begin preparing food for the day. Her hands moved skillfully as she chopped vegetables, stirred soups, and seasoned rice. The customers loved her cooking. This woman has magic in her hands, they would say. This food tastes like it was made with love. Margaret worked hard and never complained, even when her feet hurt from standing all day. Mrs. Elizabeth was impressed. Margaret, Mrs. Elizabeth said one afternoon, You're the best cook I've ever hired. Starting next week, I'm giving you a raise. Thank you, ma'am, Margaret said gratefully. You've been so kind to me. Kind nothing. Mrs. Elizabeth laughed. You've brought me more customers than I've had in years. People come from all over the market just to eat your food. That evening, Margaret walked home to Mrs. Olivia's house feeling proud of herself. She was making her own money and taking care of herself. But her heart still ached for her son. Any word from Daniel? Mrs. Olivia asked as they sat down for dinner. Margaret shook her head sadly. Nothing. It's like I never existed. Give it time, sister. The truth always comes out eventually. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was becoming more and more expensive. The engagement party had cost $4,000, and people in the city were still talking about how fancy it was. Rebecca had worn a dress that cost more than most people earned in a year. Now they were deep into wedding planning and every day brought new costs. Baby, Rebecca said one morning, showing Daniel a magazine, look at this beautiful cake. It's perfect for our wedding. Daniel looked at the picture and his eyes grew wide. The cake was huge and covered in gold decorations. How much does it cost? He asked nervously. Only $2,000, Rebecca said casually, like she was talking about $2. $2,000? For a cake. Daniel's voice cracked. Rebecca's face immediately changed. Daniel, this is our wedding. The most important day of our lives. Are you really going to be cheap about our cake? I'm not being cheap, but what? You don't think I'm worth it? Rebecca's eyes filled with fake tears. Maybe I should call off the wedding. Maybe your mother was right about me not being good enough for you. Daniel felt his heart breaking. No, please don't say that. You're everything to me. Then prove it, Rebecca demanded. Show me that you love me enough to give me everything I want. Daniel nodded weakly. Okay. The $2,000 cake. But that night, alone in his office, Daniel looked at his bank statements and felt worried. The wedding expenses were adding up quickly. The venue was $3,000. The engagement party was $4,000. The cake was $2,000. Rebecca's dress was $5,000. The flowers were $1,000. He did the math and felt sick. They had already spent over $20,000, and there were still more expenses coming. Daniel opened his laptop and looked at his business accounts. His 3 shops were doing well, but not well enough to spend this much money without consequences. For the first time since his mother left, Daniel thought about her warnings. She only cares about your money, his mother had said. Daniel shook his head. No, he said out loud. Rebecca loves me. She just wants our wedding to be perfect. The next day, Rebecca came to him with another request. Honey, I've been thinking about what I said before about putting your properties in my name. Daniel looked up from his breakfast. What about it? Well, my friend who works at the bank says it's really important. She says that if something happens to you, God forbid, but if something happens, I need to be protected. What kind of thing could happen to me? Daniel asked. Rebecca moved closer and put her hand on his arm. Baby, you're a successful businessman. Sometimes people sue successful people or the government causes problems with taxes. If your properties are in my name too, we're protected. Daniel frowned. Something about this conversation made him uncomfortable, but he couldn't figure out what. I don't know, Rebecca. Those properties are my life's work. Rebecca's eyes became cold. Your life's work? What about our life's work? Daniel, we're getting married in 2 months. We're supposed to be partners in everything. We will be partners. No, we won't. Rebecca stood up angrily. You still don't trust me? After all this time, you still think of everything as yours instead of ours. That's not true. It is true. You're just like your mother said you would be, selfish and controlling. Daniel felt like he'd been slapped. My mother never said I was selfish. She didn't have to say it, Rebecca snapped. She showed it by trying to keep you all to herself. For a moment, Daniel felt confused. His mother had never tried to keep him to herself. She had always encouraged him to make friends, to find love, to be independent. But Rebecca was crying now, and Daniel hated to see her upset. Okay, he said quietly. I'll think about the property thing. Don't think too long, Rebecca said, wiping her fake tears. The bank needs the paperwork soon if we want to protect ourselves. That afternoon, Daniel went to visit his friend James, who was also a businessman. James had been Daniel's friend since childhood, and he was one of the few people who had tried to warn Daniel about Rebecca. Daniel, my brother, James said when they met at his office. How are the wedding plans going? Expensive, Daniel laughed, but the laugh didn't sound happy. James studied his friend's face. How expensive? Daniel told him about all the costs and James's mouth fell open in shock. Daniel, that's almost $50,000. Are you crazy? It's our wedding, James. It has to be perfect. Perfect for who? You or Rebecca? Daniel felt defensive. For both of us, of course. James shook his head. Brother, I have to ask you something and I want you to answer honestly. Has Rebecca ever done anything for you that didn't involve spending your money? Daniel opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. He thought about it for a long moment. She loves me, Daniel said finally. That's not what I asked, James said gently. I asked if she's ever done anything for you that didn't cost money. Has she cooked for you? Taken care of you when you were sick? Supported you during difficult times? Given you comfort without asking for anything in return? Daniel sat quietly thinking. Rebecca had never cooked for him, she always wanted to order expensive food. When he had been sick with fever last month, she had gone shopping instead of staying with him. When he was worried about business problems, she told him to stop being negative and take her out to cheer up. She shows love in different ways, Daniel said weakly. James leaned forward. Daniel, I'm your friend, so I'm going to tell you the truth. Everyone in the city is talking about Rebecca. They're saying she's using you for your money. That's not true. Daniel stood up angrily. Then why is she asking you to put your properties in her name? Daniel's blood turned cold. How did you know about that? Because she's been asking other rich men the same question, Daniel. She was seen having lunch with Chief Desmond last week. She was also spotted at the hotel bar with Mr. Jackson. Daniel felt like the world was spinning around him. You're lying. I'm not lying and you know it, James said sadly. Your mother tried to warn you and you threw her out. Now I'm warning you and you're getting angry at me too. When will you open your eyes? Daniel left James's office feeling confused and angry. But as he drove home, his friend's words kept ringing in his head. That evening, Daniel decided to test Rebecca. He would ask her to do something simple for him, something that didn't cost money. Rebecca, he said when she came home from shopping, I'm not feeling well. Could you make me some tea? Rebecca looked at him with annoyance. Baby, I just got my nails done. Can't you ask the housekeeper to make tea? We don't have a housekeeper, Daniel said quietly. Then maybe we should hire one, Rebecca said. I'll call that expensive service tomorrow. Daniel stared at her. His mother would have already been in the kitchen making tea and checking his temperature. His mother would have sat with him and asked what was wrong. Never mind, Daniel said. I'll make it myself. Good, Rebecca said, not even looking at him. I need to call the wedding planner about the flowers. As Daniel walked to the kitchen alone, he began to wonder if everyone had been right about Rebecca all along. But he pushed those thoughts away. The wedding was only 2 months away. It was too late to change his mind now. 2 months later, the wedding day arrived like a golden storm in the city. The expensive hotel was decorated with thousands of fresh flowers. The cake stood tall like a golden tower. Everything looked perfect just like Rebecca had planned. Daniel stood at the altar in his expensive suit, watching Rebecca walk down the aisle in her $5,000 dress. She looked like a queen and everyone gasped at how beautiful she was. But as Daniel watched his bride, he couldn't help but notice the empty chair where his mother should have been sitting. Margaret was not there to see her only son get married. She was probably at the restaurant cooking food for other people's families. Do you, Daniel, take Rebecca to be your wife? The pastor asked. Daniel looked at Rebecca's beautiful face and pushed away his doubts. I do. Do you, Rebecca, take Daniel to be your husband? Rebecca smiled her most beautiful smile. I do. But in her mind she was thinking about something very different. She was thinking about Marcus, her real boyfriend who was watching from the back of the church. She was thinking about all of Daniel's money and property that would soon belong to her. The wedding reception was the most expensive party the city had seen in years. People ate fancy food, drank expensive wine, and danced to live music. Everyone said it was the wedding of the century. Your wife is so lucky, women told Daniel. You're so lucky to marry such a beautiful woman, men told him. But Daniel didn't feel lucky. He felt empty inside, like something important was missing. After the wedding, Daniel and Rebecca went to Dubai for their honeymoon. Rebecca spent every day shopping in the most expensive stores. She bought clothes, jewelry, perfumes, and bags that cost more than most people earned in a year. Isn't this wonderful? Rebecca said, showing Daniel her new diamond earrings. We can live like this every day now that we're married. Daniel smiled, but inside he was worried. The honeymoon was costing $10,000, and Rebecca showed no signs of slowing down her spending. Meanwhile, back in the city, Margaret heard about the wedding from Mrs. Olivia, who had heard about it from other people at the market. They say it was the most expensive wedding in the city history, Mrs. Olivia told Margaret gently. Margaret's heart broke a little more. Her son had gotten married and she wasn't even invited. But still she prayed for his happiness. I hope she makes him happy, Margaret whispered. Even though she took him away from me, I hope she loves him truly. Mrs. Olivia shook her head sadly. Sister, women like that don't know how to love anyone except themselves. When Daniel and Rebecca returned from Dubai, Rebecca immediately started making changes to their life. Baby, I think we need to redecorate the house, she said on their first day back. Everything looks so old and boring. The furniture is only 2 years old, Daniel said. Exactly. It's old. Rebecca wrinkled her nose. I want everything to be modern and expensive. We need to show people that we have class. How much will that cost? Daniel asked tiredly. Not much. Maybe $4,000 or $5,000. Daniel felt dizzy. Rebecca, we just spent over $50,000 on the wedding and honeymoon. I need to slow down for a while. Rebecca's face became angry immediately. Slow down? Daniel, we just got married. This is supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. It is happy but nothing. Rebecca slammed her hand on the table. I didn't marry you to live like a poor person. I married you because you're successful and wealthy. Daniel stared at his new wife. Is that the only reason you married me? Rebecca realized she had said too much. She quickly changed her expression to look sad and hurt. Of course not, baby. I married you because I love you. But I also married you because I thought we would live like rich people. If you can't afford to take care of me properly, maybe I made a mistake. The words hit Daniel like arrows. What do you mean, a mistake? I mean maybe I should have married someone who could really afford me, Rebecca said coldly. Daniel felt panic in his chest. He couldn't lose Rebecca. Not after everything he had sacrificed for her. Okay, he said quietly. We'll redecorate the house. Rebecca's smile came back immediately. Oh Daniel. You're the best husband in the world. But that night, alone in his office, Daniel looked at his bank accounts and felt sick. The wedding, honeymoon, and now the house renovations would cost almost $50,000. His savings were disappearing like water in the desert. He thought about calling his business partner to ask for a loan, but he was too proud. He thought about selling one of his shops, but that would mean less income. Then he remembered something his mother used to say, Son, when you spend money to impress people, you end up impressing yourself right into poverty. Daniel shook his head. Mama was wrong, he said out loud. Rebecca isn't trying to impress people. She just wants us to live well. But deep inside, a small voice was telling him that his mother had been right about everything. The next morning, Rebecca brought Daniel some papers to sign. What are these? Daniel asked. Oh, just some banking forms, Rebecca said casually. Remember we talked about putting your properties in both our names? For protection. Daniel looked at the papers. They would transfer ownership of his 2 houses and his 3 shops into Rebecca's name. Rebecca, these papers put everything in your name only, not both our names. That's just how the law works, baby, Rebecca lied smoothly. The lawyer said this is the safest way to do it. Don't you trust me? Daniel hesitated. Something felt wrong about signing away everything he had worked for. I need to think about this, he said. Rebecca's face became dark with anger. Think about what? We're married now, Daniel. What's yours is mine and what's mine is yours. But you don't have anything for me to share, Daniel said without thinking. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca stared at Daniel with cold, hateful eyes. So that's what you really think of me, she said quietly. You think I'm some gold digger who brought nothing to this marriage. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Rebecca started crying her fake tears. Maybe your mother was right about me. Maybe I'm not good enough for the great Daniel. Don't bring my mother into this, Daniel said, feeling confused. Why not? She's probably laughing at me right now, wherever she is. Daniel felt a sharp pain in his chest. My mother isn't laughing at anyone. She's probably working at some small job trying to survive because I threw her out for you. Rebecca stopped crying immediately. And you should have thrown her out. She was nothing but trouble. Something inside Daniel snapped. Nothing but trouble? She raised me by herself. She sacrificed everything for me. And look how she repaid you by trying to ruin your happiness. She was trying to protect me. Daniel shouted, and suddenly he realized what he had said. Rebecca stared at him. Protect you from what? From me? Daniel looked at his wife. really looked at her, for the first time since they got married. He saw the cold calculation in her eyes, the way she was studying his reaction, the way she held the property papers like weapons. Maybe, he said quietly. Rebecca's mask finally slipped completely. Well, it's too late now, isn't it? You made your choice. You threw away your pathetic mother for me. Now you're stuck with me. Daniel felt like he was waking up from a long, terrible dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was his real life, and he had created it with his own hands. And somewhere across the city, Margaret was finishing her work at the restaurant, unaware that her son was finally beginning to understand the truth she had tried to tell him months ago. 1 year passed after the wedding, and Daniel's life became darker every month. Rebecca's spending never stopped. She bought new clothes every week, expensive jewelry every month, and went to the most costly salons in the city twice a week. I need to maintain my image, she would say whenever Daniel asked about the bills. People expect the wife of a successful businessman to look perfect. But Daniel's businesses were starting to struggle. He had spent so much money on the wedding and Rebecca's lifestyle that he couldn't invest properly in his shops anymore. Baby, Rebecca said one morning, I think we should take a vacation to Paris. All my friends are posting pictures from Europe, and I look embarrassing compared to them. Daniel looked up from his calculator. He had been trying to figure out how to pay his employees this month. Rebecca, I can't afford a trip to Paris right now. Business is slow. Rebecca's face became ugly with anger. Business is slow? What kind of businessman are you if your business is slow? Even successful businesses have difficult times, Daniel said tiredly. Other husbands take their wives on expensive vacations all the time, Rebecca complained. Chief Okoro just took his wife to London. Mr. Adebayo bought his wife a new car last week. Daniel felt suspicious. How do you know so much about what other men buy their wives? Rebecca quickly looked away. I hear things. Women talk. But Daniel was starting to notice things. Rebecca was always on her phone, whispering to people. She went out for lunch with friends, almost every day, but she never told him which friends. And sometimes he found receipts in her purse from expensive restaurants where she had eaten with someone else. Meanwhile, Margaret's life was getting better. She had been working at Mrs. Elizabeth's restaurant for over a year now, and her reputation as an excellent cook had spread throughout the market. Margaret, Mrs. Elizabeth said one day, I want to make you my partner. You've brought so much success to this business that I think you deserve to own part of it. Margaret's eyes filled with tears of joy. Mrs. Elizabeth, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Mrs. Elizabeth laughed. With your cooking and my business knowledge, we can expand. Maybe open a second location. That evening, Margaret shared the good news with Mrs. Olivia. God is blessing you, sister, Mrs. Olivia said. Even in your darkest hour, he was preparing something beautiful for your future. I just wish Daniel could see how wrong he was, Margaret said sadly. I pray for him every night, but I hear things. People say his wife is spending all his money. Mrs. Olivia nodded. The truth will come out eventually. But some lessons are painful to learn. Back at Daniel's house, Rebecca was on her secret phone call again. Yes, Marcus, the plan is working perfectly, she whispered while Daniel was taking a shower. He's running out of money, but he's too proud to admit it. How much longer before you can get everything? Marcus asked. Not long now. He's desperate. Yesterday he almost signed the property papers, but then he got suspicious and stopped. What if he finds out about us? Rebecca laughed coldly. He's too stupid and too in love to figure anything out. But just in case, I'm preparing the final phase. I've been moving small amounts of money from his accounts into mine. He hasn't noticed yet because he's too busy trying to keep his failing businesses alive. You're brilliant, baby. Once we have everything, we can start our new life in America. Just be patient a little longer, Rebecca said. Soon, Daniel will have nothing and we'll have everything. When Daniel came out of the shower, Rebecca was pretending to read a magazine. Who were you talking to? He asked. My sister, Rebecca lied easily. She was telling me about her new job. Daniel nodded, but something felt wrong. Rebecca had never talked much about her family before. The next morning, Daniel went to the bank to check his accounts. When he saw the numbers, his heart almost stopped. His main savings account had only $5,000 left. 6 months ago it had $30,000. His business account was even worse. He barely had enough money to pay his employees for the next month. Daniel asked to speak with the bank manager. Mr. Daniel, the manager said, I see you've been making many large withdrawals recently. What withdrawals? Daniel asked, confused. The manager showed him the records. Your wife has been withdrawing money regularly. Large amounts. Here, here, and here. Daniel stared at the papers in shock. Rebecca had taken over $20,000 from his accounts in the past 6 months. But these are my business accounts. She doesn't have access to them. The manager looked uncomfortable. Actually, sir, she does. You signed forms giving her full access to all your accounts. Here's your signature. Daniel looked at the signature. It was his, but he couldn't remember signing these forms. Then he remembered. 3 months ago, Rebecca had brought him a stack of papers to sign. Just some insurance forms, baby, she had said. Boring stuff. Daniel had signed them without reading, trusting his wife completely. Now he realized those insurance forms were actually bank documents giving Rebecca complete access to his money. Daniel drove home with his hands shaking on the steering wheel. When he got there, he found Rebecca packing expensive suitcases. Where are you going? He asked. Shopping trip to Dubai with my friends, Rebecca said without looking at him. I'll be gone for 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Rebecca, we need to talk about money. I just found out. Found out what? Rebecca interrupted, but her voice was different. Colder. You've been taking money from my accounts. Lots of money. Rebecca stopped packing and turned to face him. For the first time since he'd known her, she wasn't pretending to be sweet and innocent. So what if I have? She said. I'm your wife. Your money is my money. You took $20,000 without telling me. And you spent $20,000 on our wedding without asking if I thought it was too much, Rebecca shot back. What's the difference? The difference is that was our wedding. This is just shopping. Rebecca laughed, and the sound was cruel and cold. Just shopping? Daniel, everything I do is just shopping to you. My clothes, my beauty treatments, my lifestyle, it's all just shopping. Well, guess what? I'm expensive to maintain. Daniel felt like he was looking at a stranger. Who are you? What happened to the woman I married? I'm the same woman, Daniel. You're just finally seeing me clearly. Rebecca zipped up her suitcase. And since we're being honest, let me tell you something else. I never loved you. I never even liked you. You were just a way for me to get money and live the lifestyle I deserve. The words hit Daniel like physical blows. You're lying. You told me you loved me. I told you what you wanted to hear, Rebecca said, picking up her bags. Just like I did everything you wanted me to do. But I'm tired of pretending now. Where are you really going? Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Rebecca smiled cruelly. I'm going to start my real life. With someone who can actually afford me. What about our marriage? What about it? You can keep the house for now. But don't get too comfortable. Soon, everything you own will belong to me legally. With that, Rebecca walked out the door, leaving Daniel standing alone in his big empty house. For the first time in 2 years, Daniel thought clearly about his mother. He thought about her warnings, her love, her sacrifices. He thought about the look of heartbreak in her eyes when he threw her out. Mama, he whispered to the empty room. You were right about everything. And I was the biggest fool in the city. But it was too late for regrets. Rebecca was gone, but she wasn't finished with him yet. The worst was still to come. For 2 weeks, Daniel lived in his big house like a ghost. He walked from room to room thinking about all the mistakes he had made. The house felt cold and empty without anyone in it, but it also felt peaceful for the first time in years. Daniel tried to focus on saving his businesses. Without Rebecca's constant spending, maybe he could get back on his feet. He worked long hours, talked to his customers, and tried to rebuild what he had lost. But on a Thursday morning, everything fell apart. Daniel's phone rang while he was at his main shop. Is this Mr. Daniel Thompson? A strange voice asked. Yes, speaking. This is Barrister Williams from Williams & Associates law firm. I'm calling about your divorce proceedings. Daniel felt confused. Divorce proceedings? I didn't file for divorce. No, sir, your wife did. Mrs. Rebecca Thompson filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. She's also claiming half of all your properties and businesses. Daniel sat down heavily in his chair. Half of everything? Actually, sir, she's claiming everything. She says you transferred all your properties into her name, and she has the documents to prove it. Daniel's blood turned to ice. Those property papers Rebecca had tried to get him to sign months ago, had she somehow forged his signature? I never signed anything giving her my properties, Daniel said. Sir, I'm just calling to inform you that you need to appear in court next Monday. You should get a lawyer immediately. That evening, Daniel went through all his important papers. His hands shook as he searched through files and documents. Then he found them. The property transfer papers. With his signature on them. But Daniel didn't remember signing these papers. The signature looked like his, but something felt wrong about it. He called his friend James immediately. "James, I need your help. Rebecca is trying to take everything I own." James came over that night and looked at the documents. "Daniel, this is bad," James said. "These papers transfer everything, your houses, your shops, even your business bank accounts, into Rebecca's name only. But I don't remember signing them." James studied the signature carefully. "It looks like your signature, but there's something strange about it. The way you write the D in Daniel is usually different." "You think she forged it?" "Maybe. Or maybe she tricked you into signing when you weren't paying attention. You said she used to bring you stacks of papers to sign?" Daniel nodded miserably. "She said they were insurance forms or banking paperwork. I trusted her, so I just signed without reading." "Brother, you need to get the best lawyer in the city. This woman is trying to steal everything you've worked for." But when Daniel called lawyers, he got more bad news. "Mr. Thompson," his lawyer said, "this case will be very difficult. Your wife has very good lawyers and the documents appear to be legal. Even if we can prove some signatures were forged, it will take months or years to resolve. How much will it cost to fight this?" "At least $10,000, and that's just to start. If the case goes on for a long time, it could cost much more." Daniel laughed bitterly. "I don't have $10,000. My wife spent all my money." 3 days later, the court papers arrived. Rebecca was claiming everything: the house they lived in, his 3 shops, his other rental property, and even his car. But the worst news was still coming. Daniel went to his shops to check on business, but when he arrived at his main store, he found a big lock on the door. "What happened here?" he asked the security guard. "Sorry, sir, but the new owner came yesterday with court papers. She said the shop belongs to her now, and all the workers should go home." Daniel felt like the world was spinning around him. He drove to his second shop, same thing. Locked up with a notice saying, "Property of Mrs. Rebecca Thompson." His third shop was also closed. Daniel sat in his car outside his locked shops and realized the terrible truth. Rebecca had been planning this for years. Every expensive purchase, every property transfer, every signature she had asked for, it was all part of a plan to take everything he owned. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked around his big house, knowing it might not be his much longer. At 3 in the morning, his phone rang. "Hello, Daniel." Rebecca's voice was sweet and mocking. "How do you like your new life?" "Rebecca, why are you doing this to me?" Daniel asked, his voice broken. "Because I can," she laughed. "And because you deserve it. You threw out your own mother for me, remember? Anyone who can be so cruel to the woman who raised him deserves whatever happens to him. Please at least leave me one shop so I can work and eat." "No," Rebecca said coldly. "I want everything. Just like you gave me everything when you thought I loved you." "Where are you calling from?" "I'm in Dubai with my real boyfriend. We're having a wonderful time spending your money." Rebecca's laugh was cruel. "By the way, we've been together for 3 years. Even before I met you. You were just a job to us." Daniel felt like his heart had stopped. 3 years. 3 years. Every kiss I gave you was fake. Every time I said, "I love you," was a lie. Every moment we spent together was just me acting so I could take your money. The phone went quiet for a moment, then Rebecca continued. "Oh, and Daniel? Don't bother looking for me. By next week, I'll be in America with a new identity and all your money. You'll never see me again. Rebecca, please?" But the line went dead. Daniel sat on his expensive couch in his big living room and began to cry like a child. Not because he had lost his money or his businesses, but because he finally understood how completely he had been fooled. The woman he had chosen over his own mother had never existed. She had been an actress playing a role to steal everything he had. And his mother, his dear, loving mother who had only tried to protect him, where was she now? Was she even alive? Would she ever forgive him for the terrible thing he had done? As the sun rose over the city, Daniel looked around his house one more time. Soon the lawyers would come. Soon everything would be gone. But for the first time in 3 years, Daniel's mind was completely clear. He knew exactly what he had to do. He had to find his mother and beg for her forgiveness. The question was, would it be too late? 2 weeks later, Daniel stood outside his house with a single bag in his hands, watching as the court bailiffs changed the locks. His expensive cars were being loaded onto tow trucks. His furniture would be sold at auction. "Sir, you need to vacate the premises now," the bailiff said, not unkindly. "The new owner will be taking possession tomorrow." Daniel nodded and walked away from the only home he had known as a married man. He had nowhere to go. His friends had all disappeared when news of his bankruptcy spread through the city. The same people who had praised him for marrying such a classy woman, now whispered behind his back about how foolish he had been. James was the only one who still talked to him, but Daniel was too ashamed to ask for help. For the first week, Daniel slept in his old office above what used to be his main shop. But soon the new tenants came and he had to leave there too. He found himself in a small guest house in one of the city's poorer neighborhoods, paying daily rates with the little cash he had left. The room was tiny with peeling paint and a broken air conditioner, but it was all he could afford. Every morning Daniel walked the streets looking for work. But his reputation had been destroyed. Word spread quickly in business circles. Daniel Thompson was the fool who had been tricked by his wife, who had lost everything to a woman, who had even thrown out his own mother for a stranger. "We can't trust a man who has such poor judgment," one potential employer told him bluntly. Days turned into weeks. Daniel's money ran out. He moved to an even cheaper place, then to sleeping in his friend's shop, and finally to sleeping rough in the market. The man who had once lived in a mansion and driven expensive cars now queued for free food at charity centers. His clothes became dirty and worn. His face grew thin with hunger. But the physical hardship was nothing compared to the pain in his heart. Every night, lying on his cardboard bed in the market, Daniel thought about his mother. He remembered her face the day he had thrown her out, the shock, the hurt, the way her shoulders had sagged as she walked away from his gate. He remembered all the warnings she had given him about Rebecca. Every single one had come true. "She's using you, my son. She doesn't love you the way I love you. Be careful with your money around that woman. Something about her is not right." His mother had been right about everything. And he had rewarded her wisdom by breaking her heart and casting her out like a stranger. After 2 months on the streets, Daniel made a decision. He had to find his mother. But where was she? Daniel went back to the house where he had grown up, where his mother had lived before he forced her to leave. The new tenants told him they had never heard of Margaret Thompson. He went to his mother's old friends in the neighborhood, but many of them refused to talk to him. "You should be ashamed of yourself," one elderly woman told him. "Your mother cried for weeks after what you did to her. She was so heartbroken she couldn't even tell us what happened at first. Please just tell me where she is," Daniel begged. "What? So you can hurt her again?" "No, Ma, please. I've learned my lesson. I just want to apologize." The woman studied his thin face and dirty clothes. "You look like you've suffered," she said finally. "Good. Maybe now you understand what pain feels like." But she wouldn't tell him where his mother was. Daniel searched everywhere. He went to every market in the city, looking for his mother among the food sellers. He checked hospitals thinking maybe she was sick. He even went to churches hoping she might be taking shelter there. Nothing. For 3 weeks, Daniel searched every day. He slept wherever he could find shelter and spent every waking hour looking for the woman he had thrown away like garbage. Then, on a Tuesday morning as Daniel was walking through the city market, he heard a familiar voice. "Rice and stew. Hot rice and stew. Very sweet." Daniel's heart stopped. He knew that voice. He followed the sound through the crowded market until he saw her. His mother was sitting beside a small wooden table, selling rice from 2 big pots. She looked older and thinner than he remembered, but she was wearing clean clothes and had a small smile as she served her customers. Daniel stood about 20 feet away watching her. For several minutes he couldn't move. The woman who had raised him, who had sacrificed everything for his education and success, was now selling food on the roadside to survive. Because of him. A customer approached, and Daniel listened as his mother served him with kindness and respect, the same way she had always treated everyone. "Mama, your rice is the best in this market," the man said as he paid. "Thank you, my son." "God bless you," Margaret replied warmly. Watching her interact with strangers with such grace, knowing he had destroyed her life, Daniel felt his knees go weak. He tried to step forward, but his feet wouldn't move. What could he possibly say to her? How could he face the woman he had wounded so deeply? As he watched, frozen with shame and fear, his mother looked up and saw him. Their eyes met across the crowded market. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Margaret stared at her son, thin, dirty, wearing the same clothes for weeks, and Daniel stared back at his mother, the woman whose heart he had broken. Then Margaret stood up slowly. Daniel watched as she walked toward him, weaving between the market stalls and customers. With each step she took, his shame grew heavier. When she was just a few feet away, Daniel fell to his knees right there in the busy market. "Mama, I'm sorry," he whispered, and then louder, "Mama, I'm so sorry." Tears poured down his face as 3 years of pain, regret, and loss crashed over him all at once. I was wrong, Mama. You were right about everything. Rebecca took everything, all my money, all my shops, everything. She was using me the whole time, just like you said. People in the market began to stop and stare, but Daniel didn't care. I threw you out of my life for a woman who never even loved me. I chose a stranger over my own mother. I am the most foolish man in this country, Mama. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you, please forgive me. Daniel was crying so hard he could barely speak. I looked for you everywhere, Mama. For weeks I searched, sleeping in markets, eating garbage, just trying to find you so I could tell you how sorry I am. Margaret looked down at her son, kneeling in the dust of the market, and her own eyes filled with tears. But when she spoke, her voice was gentle. Stand up, Daniel. No, Mama, I don't deserve to stand in front of you. I said stand up, my son. Daniel slowly got to his feet, unable to look at his mother's face. Margaret reached out and touched his cheek the way she used to when he was a small boy. You are my only child, she said softly. The only person God gave me to love in this world. Do you think a mother stops loving her child because he makes mistakes? Daniel looked up at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. I never stopped praying for you, Margaret continued. Every morning and every night I asked God to protect you and open your eyes. I asked him to bring you back to me when you were ready to come home. Can you ever forgive me, Mama? Margaret pulled her son into her arms right there in the middle of the busy market. I forgave you the same day you hurt me, she whispered into his ear. Because that's what mothers do. We love our children no matter what they do to us. Daniel cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child, holding on to his mother as if she might disappear again. Around them, the market had gone quiet. Other traders and customers watched the reunion with tears in their own eyes, understanding without being told that they were witnessing something sacred. Come, Margaret said finally, taking Daniel's hand. Let me pack up my things. Then we're going home. Home? Yes, my son. We're going home. Margaret's home was a single room in Surrey, small but warm. On the wall hung Daniel's graduation photo. She had kept it all these years. You're living like this because of me, Daniel said, ashamed. Peace doesn't come from big houses, Margaret replied. It comes from doing what's right. The next morning she woke him early. Get up. We're going to work. Margaret taught Daniel everything: how to prepare food, serve customers, handle money honestly. At first, Daniel was embarrassed, worried old acquaintances would see him. There's no shame in honest work, his mother said firmly. Only in being lazy or dishonest. Months passed. Daniel learned patience, generosity, and humility. When an old business associate saw him and asked mockingly, "What are you doing selling food like a common trader?" Daniel stood straight and smiled. I'm working honestly to eat. I'm a son who learned to respect his mother and a man who sleeps peacefully because I'm not cheating anyone. After a year of saving, they opened Mama Margaret's Kitchen, a tiny restaurant known for good food and fair prices. Daniel never made decisions without his mother's advice. The business grew slowly but steadily. They hired employees, moved to a bigger location, but Daniel never forgot his lessons. 5 years later, Daniel stood in their successful restaurant watching his mother teach new employees. The place was full of regular customers who felt like family. His phone buzzed with a message from James. Brother, your success now is worth more than all the money you used to have. Daniel smiled and walked to his mother, who was laughing with customers. Mama, thank you for never giving up on me. Margaret looked at her son, no longer the proud fool who had chosen a stranger over family, but a humble man who understood true success. My son, a mother's love never gives up. It just waits patiently for its children to come home. As the sun set over the city, Daniel realized the truth. He had less money than ever before, but he was richer than he'd ever been in his life. The greatest wealth wasn't what he owned, it was who he had become. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.